fellow at the America First Policy Institute, Kenneth Timmerman. Kenneth, great to be with you. I'm going to start with this. As you know, another night of punishing strikes on Iran. And for the first time since the attacks resumed, it is being reported that the U.S. used the B-1 bomber to strike the Islamic Revolutionary Guard earlier this week. What does that signal to you? And do you think this is maybe a precursor of what is to come next?
I think it is a precursor, Tracy, of what's to come next. We're hearing reports from inside Iran of casualties, pretty extensive casualties among the Revolutionary Guard's troops. It would appear that the United States has been targeting them for several days, not just this B-1 bomber strike, but for several days. So I think we're going to see more of that to come. That's a message, by the way, to the Iranian people. When we hit the Revolutionary Guards, when we hit their leadership, when we hit their barracks, when we hit the Basij, who are the paramilitary troops enforcing on the ground this rule against the people of Iran when they rise up to protest. These are the ones shooting protesters. This is a message to the people of Iran. We're there for you. We are coming. I am waiting for the next phase of this war, what I call Act 5 of this Shakespearean 5-act drama, which is the uprising of the Iranian people with help from the United States and Israel.
Yeah, and Kenneth, we have been hearing from our panelists and people that are actually Iranians here living right now in the United States saying a majority of the Iranian people are behind the United States and want to see things change. So keeping an eye on that. And just a few hours ago, Iran-backed Houthi rebels attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea. And if you look at this map right here, you can see the strategic importance of the Red Sea as an alternate route to the Strait of Hormuz. In a Truth Social post, the president, he said this, he said, if they do this again, the U.S. will hold Iran responsible and will strike both Iran and the Houthis. Kenneth, if you were advising the president, what would you say to him? What would you tell him to do as his next move?
Look, the Houthis are Iran. Hamas is Iran. Hezbollah is Iran. And President Trump understands this. When the Houthis don't act by themselves, they act on orders from the Iranian regime. So the president is absolutely right to hold the government of the Islamic regime in Tehran responsible for everything that the Houthis do. If they attack ships in the Bab el-Mandeb or in the Red Sea, we should hold the Iranian regime accountable. Absolutely.
Yeah, and on this point, we're going to talk to Caitlin, correspondent for the New York Post. We're going to bring her into our panel. Caitlin Dornbos. Caitlin, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. At this point in the conflict, both sides, they're really threatening civilian infrastructure. What does this represent to you? Is this an escalation that possibly we may see boots on the ground soon?
You know, it is really important to talk when we're talking about that infrastructure. What is civilian? What is military? So the United States, when they're looking at the bridges that they're striking, perhaps, they're not seeing those as civilian infrastructure. They're actually seeing those as being used by the military to carry out nefarious acts, to target perhaps vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, as we've seen. And so that's a little bit different than, say, Iran striking water desalination points in Kuwait, which actually affects the water that is supplied to the country as well. We're having a little bit of a definition issue with what is civilian and what is military targets. However, that being said, I am seeing quite an escalation in the region. You know, we've seen reports and flight tracking data that have shown much more, not only military personnel being flown into the region for potential offensive strikes, but also medics being sent to Landstuhl. That is a base in Germany where the U.S. does most of its emergency medical training and processes once someone is injured, say in the Middle East, as we've seen 4 people hit, 4 troops unfortunately lose their lives over the past week.
Yeah, and we also heard from our Zach Anders, who was saying, Caitlin, that they are opening shelters in Israel right now. What does that signal to you, Caitlin?
Yeah, there's nobody better than the Israelis at getting somebody prepared to go down to the shelter. I'm always amazed every time I go to Israel, the way people take it so seriously and they go to shelter every time. You don't always see that, unfortunately, in war zones. But I do think that that's a big signal that Israel is aware of possible plans that Iran might have to potentially target Israel. I'm sure they're concerned. Iran has not started striking Israel in this volley of barrage and fire, but they have certainly always got it on their minds. And I think Israeli intelligence is really good at figuring out what Iran's going to do next. And the fact that they're opening shelters, that's a pretty significant indicator for you.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio met early this morning in the Philippines to speak with foreign ministers. Here's what he had to say about the day-to-day progress with Iran. Listen.
Iran is begging us, okay, both directly and indirectly. Let's do a deal. Let's talk. Iran is begging every day. The problem with Iran is every time they make a deal, the people that are in charge there, they either break it or they want to change it. So it looks like they're not ready to make a deal. So they're going to continue to pay a price. And every night the price gets higher and higher and higher. And that's what's happening now. And until maybe in a few days, they'll be ready to make a deal once they realize that this is not a winning proposition for them.
All right, Kenneth, do you think Iran is going to make a deal with us? And also, as you know, President Trump is considering attacking Pickaxe Mountain. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Do we have the capability militarily to do that? And do you think we should?
First on the deal, the Iranians are not going to make a deal. And as the secretary said, if they do claim to make a deal, as they did with the memorandum of understanding, they're going to break it within hours. They made another deal with President Trump on the phone. Within 2 hours, they broke the deal. They are not going to make a deal because the deal requires them to open the Strait of Hormuz, and it requires them to get rid of their nuclear capabilities. They're not going to do either one of them. Iran is waging asymmetrical warfare. When we attack military targets, they attack civilian targets. That was the significance of their warning shot last Friday, I think it was, when they hit the desalination plant in Kuwait. They said, you threaten roads and bridges in our country, we're going to hit civilian infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region in general. Pickaxe Mountain is absolutely critical. The Israeli reports that the Iranians have moved their uranium enrichment centrifuges to this deeply buried facility just south of Natanz, which we bombed last June. It's extremely important. We have to take it out. Secretary Hegseth has said in the Senate yesterday, we have the capability to do it, but it all depends on what we are willing to do. So wait and see what we use. I don't think it's going to be boots on the ground. I think we have other capabilities, but we are going to take out Pickaxe Mountain. I am certain of that.
Yeah, another thing I want to touch on also is Saudi Arabia. The President Trump posting to Truth Social about his approval of a 30-year civilian nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia. He said this, quote, he wrote, the civilian nuclear deal, there will be no enrichment of material being made between the United States Department of Energy and Saudi Arabia, which pertains only to non-military use, such as the ones that Iran and UAE and others already have, will be approved, but is totally subject to Saudi Arabia joining the very respected and successful Abraham Accords. Caitlin, do you think they'll do that? And how significant would it be to have Saudi Arabia sign the Abraham Accords?
It would be massively, massively important and a huge thing for President Trump's legacy to see the Abraham Accords signed with Saudi Arabia. They've been close before. However, I don't know. I don't know if this will actually be enough to get them to the table to do that. That is a big step. Now, I will say that Iran hasn't done itself any favors in preventing the Abraham Accords from expanding. If anything, this whole war has just brought the U.S. and Gulf countries, and largely even Gulf countries and Israel, closer together. So it is a possibility now. But, you know, with Saudi Arabia now kind of getting a bait and switch, if you will, it's unclear whether they knew when they signed what they did yesterday with the Department of Energy that there would be an Abraham Accords addendum tacked onto it. So it is kind of a touch and go thing, but it's a very big deal. And that's something, a big goal that Trump has had in his eye since his first administration.
Yeah, Ken, what do you think? And how could that, if Saudi Arabia signs on to the Abraham Accords, how could that really change the landscape of the region?
Oh, it changes everything. The Saudis have been the one who have always been holding back and saying, well, you have to grant Palestinian statehood before we'll do anything. Look, a nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia is huge, and the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords is huge. These are two big wins for President Trump. He's going to make sure that the Saudis do not get enrichment capabilities. By the way, I was amused to see Democrats who thought that the Obama nuclear deal with Iran, which allowed them to continue enriching uranium, was a good thing. Well, they said, oh no, we can't allow Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium. Well, that's not going to happen, but still they were against it. So you see also in the Democrat Party, they are a little confused on what their actual priorities are.
Yeah, to say the least. All right, Kenneth Timmerman, Caitlin Dorenbos, always great to be with both of you. Thank you both so much for your insights.
Thank you.